Hey guys! Welcome back to part 2 of Senpai is an Otokonoko. For those who haven't checked out part 1 yet, make sure to watch that first. And here's what you missed. Makoto has always been into cross-dressing since he was a little kid. So much so that he'd even show up to school dressed as a girl. Of course, not everyone's cool with that, except for Saki. She's got a crush on Makoto and doesn't care that he's a cross-dresser. But the thing is, Makoto's best friend, Ryuji, has also started falling for him. With all these feelings flying around, who's gonna win Makoto's heart? By the way, if you haven't smashed that like button or subbed yet, please do. It would really help us out. It lets us keep making content for you guys. Stay tuned for more. We promise it's worth it. Our story starts in a classroom one gloomy afternoon. A girl is holding a letter asking her to meet in the classroom after school, although it seems like it is already way past the meeting time. Makoto is just about to leave when a young girl suddenly comes running into the room and apologizes for being late. Her name is Awoyi, and she is also part of the student board, like Makoto and the one who sent the letter. She didn't waste time and immediately told Makoto the reason why she asks to meet him. With so much energy not often seen in love confession scenes like this, Awoyi exclaimed her feelings for Makoto and asked for them to start dating. Makoto couldn't believe it, more so when Awoyi admitted that she just liked everything about her. That, and the fact that Awoyi actually likes girls. Awoyi knew that Makoto might feel uncomfortable being confessed to by a girl, but she just didn't want to regret not having done anything, so she had to tell her. But it seemed that things wouldn't go the way Awoyi wanted. Makoto suddenly starts taking off her blouse and wig, revealing that she is actually a he and not a she. Makoto was feeling guilty at first for leading Awoyi, but to his surprise, his junior actually liked this better. As it turns out, Awoyi swings both ways, and she's just over the moon knowing that. Makoto is an actual Otokonoko, which means she can spend time with both the boy and girl versions of him. Unfortunately, even though she's okay with Makoto being an Otokonoko, it doesn't mean that they can start going out. Makoto confesses that he doesn't believe he'll ever start having feelings for her, even when they do date. But Awoyi is not one to easily give up, and so she declares that she'll do everything she can to make Makoto fall for her. The next day, Makoto was still thinking about Awoyi's confession. Although he regretted it a bit, he also knows that it's for the best, especially since others had not been kind to someone like him, and he doesn't want her to suffer. But just like Awoyi declared that afternoon, she persistently pursued Makoto, looking for him and wanting to talk to him. Makoto, however, would hide from her every time. That is until she finally caught him off guard and approached him during his PE class. Makoto then tells her that although the first years didn't know about him being a cross-dresser, the higher levels knew, and it would look bad on her if she's seen associating with him. This made Awoyi sad, not because of how others might view her, but because she thought that him being an Otokonoko is their dirty little secret. Makoto started laughing and told Awoyi that she's weird, but even so she didn't mind, which just proves that Awoyi is someone who doesn't care about what others think of her and just does whatever she feels right. Later that day, Awoyi gives Makoto a pink hanky in exchange for the hanky he gave her the day before. As much as he wants it, though he remembers her mom telling him when he was young that he can't have girly stuff. Fortunately, Awoyi isn't like her mom. Meanwhile, someone is seen spying on the two whose identity is later revealed to be Makoto's childhood friend Ryuji. He believes that Awoyi is up to no good and is openly calling out to her to leave Makoto alone. This is not because he's just a meanie, but because Makoto has had experiences like this before, which ended up to be just a prank. The misunderstanding was later resolved, although it caused Awoyi to embarrass herself in front of Makoto. All's well that ends well. Despite the mishaps, Awoyi managed to befriend Ryuji after she picked up the student handbook he dropped, and in it was a picture of a sleeping Makoto's, if you call blackmailing befriending, that is. The next day, Ryuji gave Awoyi 3 photos of a younger Makoto in exchange for her keeping her mouth shut about the picture in his handbook. Awoyi teased Ryuji about having a crush on Makoto, which he vehemently denied. Awoyi suddenly saw Makoto from afar and tried to call out to him, but Ryuji stopped her. He then told her that although Makoto dresses up as a girl, he doesn't really want to stand out. That's why, if she keeps on acting like she did, then she'll just become a burden to him. Now that Awoyi finally understands where Ryuji's protectiveness is coming from, she sees him in a new light and even calls him her master. After all, he knows a lot about Makoto from over the years that they have been friends. Later in the day during class, Makoto was thinking about Awoyi and how she's already befriended Ryuji. Suddenly, Awoyi called out to him from outside, although she was shortly after scolded by her teacher. Awoyi soon after remembered Ryuji telling her not to approach Makoto in front of others, and only talk to him during lunch. The next day, Makoto and Ryuji were having lunch at the rooftop. Suddenly, Awoyi appears and complains that they went to have lunch without inviting her. Ryuji was just impressed that she managed to find them there. Anyways, Awoyi is a pretty crafty girl, using the excuse that the summer break was about to begin and they wouldn't be able to see each other for quite a while. She asked for Makoto's line address so they could still chat. Although reluctant at first, Makoto eventually agreed after Ryuji convinced him. By the end of the day, Awoyi wanted to go home with Makoto together since it was the last day of school, although she got rejected. Fortunately, Ryuji felt bad for her, so he gave her Makoto's notebook and asked her to return it to him so she has an excuse to go to Makoto's house. Meanwhile, Makoto was welcomed home by his mother. As it turns out, his mother doesn't know that he dresses up as a girl at school, and that's why he tries his best to act as boyishly as he can when he's with her at home. Later in the evening, the doorbell suddenly ding-donged, and Makoto was asked to get it, just as much because the visitor was actually Awoyi on the errand that Ryuji had sent her to do. Awoyi was very much welcomed by Makoto's mother, who thought at first that she was his girlfriend. Before his mother could start telling embarrassing stuff to Awoyi, though Makoto managed to convince her that it was about time for Awoyi to get home, and even volunteered to walk her back. The two eventually stopped at a park, where Makoto confessed to Awoyi that his mother doesn't know about him being a crossdresser, and he wants to keep it that way. Not long after, Ryuji suddenly appeared with a bunch of fireworks for them to play with. When they were down to the last 3 sparklers, Awoyi asked if it was possible for them to meet again outside of school, and the two agreed. Their first get-together was at a public pool where not only Awoyi, but also Ryuji were exposed to a less conservative version of Makoto. A couple of weeks later, they met at Wadenold's, where Awoyi brought them some souvenirs from her trip to the Galapagos Islands. The summer break was almost over by then, and Makoto was looking forward to it, especially since that means the founding party is upon them as well. It's a fancy party where everyone wears dresses and suits and fancy food is served. Makoto wasn't able to attend the previous year because he got sick, and that's why he's so excited about it this year. This is going to be the first time that Makoto will be able to wear a dress, or any girly clothes for that matter that aren't a school uniform. As expected, it wasn't just him, but also Awoyi and Ryuji looked forward to seeing it. Speaking of Awoyi, she suddenly suggested that they go shopping together for dresses. Makoto was reluctant at first, but with Ryuji's assurance to have his back and Awoyi's instigation for anything cute pilgrimage, he eventually agreed. On the day of their agreed-upon get-together, Makoto did his best to choose clothes that would pass as a girl along with his wig. Although he had reservations at first, after some rando suddenly came up to him and invited him to go to a cafe. Thinking he was a girl, Makoto was just so happy. Makoto excitedly met up with Awoyi and Ryuji, who very much appreciated his OOTD. The trio's first stop was a dress shop where Makoto and Awoyi excitedly chose dresses to try on. As for Ryuji, he just doesn't understand the difference between dresses and feels so out of place. Next stop was an ice cream shop that sells cute animal-inspired ice creams. By this time, Ryuji almost couldn't contain himself. He just couldn't help getting excited seeing Makoto like this. Finally, they went shopping for shoes, and Makoto decided to go with red high heels. He had a hard time even just standing with them at first, but his enthusiasm to wear it got the better of him. It was almost sunset when they finally decided to go home and promised to do something like this again in the future. But see, the world is round, and what goes up must come down. It seems like Makoto had spent all his good fortune that day, since the scene he saw once he got home might just convince him to make drastic changes in his everyday life. As it so happens, his mother came upon the hanky that Awoyi gave him, and thought that Makoto had reverted back to his childhood years, where he was so interested in cute and girly things. Fortunately, he was able to play it cool and convince his mother that it was Awoyi's, and that he just forgot to give it back to her after borrowing it. Going back to memory lane, Makoto's mother had never been supportive of him liking girly stuff to the point that she had a breakdown after she found out he was collecting girly stuff and was even trying out a skirt. She rejected him and refused to listen to him. Fortunately, Makoto's dad was more receptive. He calmly asks Makoto if he wants to become a girl, and when Makoto said that he doesn't know, he decided to enroll him in a school where Makoto will be allowed to wear girl clothes, although they will have to hide this from his mom. Back to the present. Seeing his mother like this, Makoto decided that he should stop doing it and just live like how his mother would like. Everyone at school was making a fuss seeing Makoto out of his girl uniforms. Even Ryuji and Awoyi were surprised. Although Ryuji was calmer and supported Makoto in his decision, Awoyi wasn't. Despite Makoto telling them that this was what he really wanted to do, Awoyi is not convinced at all. She got so upset that she refused to talk to Makoto until he started being honest with his feelings. Meanwhile, Makoto started becoming popular with his classmates and schoolmates. His teachers also started to rely on him more. Everything was going great, except for the fact that Awoyi still refused to talk to him. After a week went by, Awoyi suddenly asked Makoto to go home together. That doesn't mean that she's given up on her opinion about Makoto's decision, though. They got into a little argument until Makoto suddenly asked Awoyi to be his girlfriend. Even though this was what Awoyi had wanted to happen all this time, his words made her so upset that she once again walked out on him. Another week went by, and Ryuji couldn't take it anymore, so he went out of his way to convince Awoyi to make up with Makoto. But she's just too stubborn for her own good, and there's no convincing her at all. Makoto, on the other hand, had decided to throw away all his girly stuff for good and even tore down the dress he bought for the party. It was hurting him, but he knew this had to be done. Not long after, it was finally the night of the founding party. Ryuji and Awoyi were having a blast eating all the served fancy food, being the foodie that they are. As for Makoto, he was talking to a female classmate who had decided to wear a wig for the event, and for a while, their Makoto almost had a relapse but managed to hold himself back. That is until he was left on his own and thought over the things that really mattered to him. Back to Ryuji and Awoyi. They've decided to take a rest from eating and went out of the gym where the party was being held. Suddenly, Awoyi saw one of the garbage collectors holding a plastic bag with Makoto's red heels. Without even explaining anything to Ryuji, Awoyi started running after the garbage truck, fully determined to take back the shoes she knew was precious to Makoto. And what of Makoto, you ask? After he suddenly borrowed his classmate's wig, Makoto went to the bathroom and tried it on. Although he found himself looking ridiculous with long hair while wearing a suit, it doesn't really matter since this is who he truly is. Makoto then went looking for Awoyi. After Ryuji told him that she came running after a garbage truck, Makoto followed suit without explaining anything to Ryuji as well, who was surprised to see him wearing a wig. Awoyi's senpai eventually found her walking by the shore, and to get her attention, he suddenly shouted all the things that Awoyi had been wanting him to say for the past 2 weeks. Of how he actually likes cute stuff, and that he prefers to wear the girls' blazer rather than the boys'. He admitted that he had wanted to deny himself of what he truly wants, but just like how Awoyi hadn't given up on him, he also doesn't want to give up on himself. Finally, they had made up, and as some sort of reward for his honesty, Awoyi gave him the heels which he had fortunately managed to retrieve from the garbage truck. Awoyi then made Makoto wear the heels, and even offered her own dress to complete the outfit. In return, Makoto gave her his suit, and the two of them spent a memorable time dancing with each other. The next day, everyone was once again back to making a fuss after seeing Makoto back to dressing up as a girl. Although it doesn't seem like everything will just go back to the way it was, some of the friends that Makoto had made when he was dressed up as a boy had decided to stay. Meanwhile, Ryuji seems to slowly come to terms with the feelings he might actually have for Makoto. He is conflicted, however, and was thinking that perhaps just like Makoto, he too has to change. One day at lunch, the trio were talking about what they do on the upcoming short break. Ryuji suggested that they go to the aquarium, which everyone enthusiastically agreed to. On the agreed-upon date, Makoto came while wearing a dress which he secretly bought. It earned approval from both Ryuji and Awoyi, although the latter was more expressive. And so the three spent a good amount of their day walking around the aquarium and enjoying the marine life in it. Although the trip had to be cut short when Makoto suddenly noticed a couple of ladies from their neighborhood. Fortunately, he had reliable friends who always had his back. As Awoyi baited herself to distract Makoto's neighbors, Ryuji took Makoto's hand and carefully left the facility. Once they were safely out, Makoto pointed out to Ryuji how it's been a while since the two of them had held hands together, which in turn made Ryuji suddenly feel conscious. Before their trip ended, Makoto presented Ryuji and Awoyi with souvenirs he specially chose for them, although Awoyi was acting sus after receiving hers. Once the break was over, and it was back to reality, that is school. Awoyi was in the dumps when she found out that she failed the tests on 2 of her subjects. She sought the help of her senpais who agreed to help her. It fell to Ryuji, the one mainly responsible, in teaching Awoyi, seeing as not only is he the smartest of the 3, but also because Makoto is busy helping out in club activities. But Ryuji doesn't seem like he's cut out for teaching at all. The study session he and Awoyi were having at the library just isn't going anywhere. Shortly after, Makoto finally arrived, and Ryuji offered to do a study camp over the weekend at their house. More than Aoyi agreeing, Ryuji was more conscious of Makoto's decision to join them. Fortunately, he too was excited about it. And so the weekend came. Ryuji's little sister Konatsu also welcomed them to their house. She seemed pretty close to Makoto and has also taken a liking to Aoyi, in a way. After spending a good part of the day studying, Aoyi was finally certain that the problem in their previous tutoring sessions was Ryuji's Spartan way of teaching, unlike Makoto's. Unfortunately, there's no way that one can be good at everything. While Ryuji seems to be gifted at cooking, Makoto isn't. But that doesn't really matter since Aoyi declares she'll eat whatever it is that Makoto makes. By the time they were about to sleep, Konatsu bids goodbye after scaring Makoto with one of her horror stories. By the time they were about to go home the following day, Makoto and Ryuji found out that Aoyi was actually living alone with her grandma, while his father is always away doing research on whales. That said, Aoyi thanks her senpais for their help and assures them that she'll ace her makeup tests, although Ryuji had his doubts. Speaking of doubts, for a while now, Ryuji had caught Aoyi acting sus around Makoto on certain occasions, and adding the suspicions that Konatsu raised about whether Aoyi really has a thing for Makoto or not. Ryuji couldn't help but feel that something fishy is at play. Not long after Aoyi arrives at their house and her grandma welcomes her home, they paid their respects to her grandpa and chatted a bit about her weekend trip with Makoto and Ryuji. Later that evening, as Aoyi was about to go to sleep, she seems to be having conflicting thoughts about her feelings for Makoto. Oh no. Just what could this mean? Was Ryuji's suspicions of Aoyi right all along? Were the feelings she claims to have all a bluff? Are you guys still tuning in? I hope you are. And while you're at it, please like and subscribe to our channel. Pretty please. Aoyi and Ryuji were showing their support to Makoto as they spent their weekend coming to watch his practice with the basketball team. He was so good that the regular members invited him to join their club. Back to Aoyi and Ryuji, the older boy finally got the courage to ask Aoyi about her real feelings for Makoto. She tried to avoid answering by asking Ryuji the same thing, prompting him to finally admit that he really loves Makoto. Aoyi started crying as she admitted that she really wanted to be in love with Makoto, but for some reason she was not. She felt frustrated that she couldn't have the same feelings as Ryuji did. When Aoyi suddenly ran away from the gym, Ryuji chased after her and gave her a pep talk. He then told her to calm down before going back. Not long after, Aoyi returned and apologized to Ryuji for her behavior. When Makoto sees them talking and notices how close they seem to have gotten, he suddenly gets the idea that Aoyi has changed her feelings for him, and that she's now dating Ryuji. Later in the afternoon after Aoyi went home, Makoto asked Ryuji if he liked anyone at the moment. The very conscious Ryuji in return asked Makoto if he likes Aoyi, still believing that Ryuji and Aoyi were a thing, denied liking her in a romantic way, and even encouraged Ryuji to go after her. Ryuji, of course, vehemently denies this, although he did eventually confirm that he likes someone, and Makoto knows that person really well. Since his friend didn't exactly tell him who it was, Makoto just became more curious as to who this person is that Ryuji's fancies. The next day, with the season changing, it's not ideal to eat lunch by the rooftop anymore, and so they decided to use some empty room downstairs instead. Makoto was lost in thought as he realized just how close Ryuji and Aoyi had become. And although Ryuji told him that he doesn't have feelings for Aoyi, the same thing can't be said for Aoyi. To somehow clear his mind, Makoto volunteered to ask permission for them to use an empty room. As he did, Ryuji and Aoyi were left on their own. This time Ryuji asked Aoyi why she isn't as expressive around Makoto as she used to be. Aoyi told him that she had decided to give up on Makoto once she realized that her feelings for him couldn't compare to how Ryuji does. Instead, she assured him that she'll do her best to support the two of them. The following day, Ryuji caught the cold, so he was absent from school, which means that it'll just be Aoyi and Makoto eating lunch that day. Makoto felt a bit awkward since it's been a while since they've been on their own. Feeling awkward, however, seems to be the least of his concerns. Aoyi told Makoto that she's now decided to start eating lunch with her friends instead of hanging out with him and Ryuji. She also admitted that she's now giving up on trying to be with him, although she did still hope for them to stay friends. Although he didn't press. Makoto is clearly upset with Aoyi's decision. Once Ryuji had fully recovered and was back at school, one of his classmates handed him a questionnaire about what they wanted to do for their future. By lunchtime that day, as Aoyi declared the day before, she stopped eating lunch with her seniors. With only Ryuji and Makoto left, the latter found it necessary to make it clear that he really doesn't have a thing for Aoyi. In return, Makoto told him how Aoyi had confessed that she's not into him anymore. and that's why he thought that it was because Ryuji and Aoyi were together. The two then eventually started talking about the career planning questionnaire they received. Ryuji suddenly felt upset, realizing that he and Makoto may just have about a year left to hang out like this since their future plans might not align and they can't be together anymore. The following day, Makoto was approached by one of the basketball members and was asked if he'd already decided whether he'd join the club or not. As Makoto was on his way home, he was conflicted about the decisions he had to make regarding his future plans and whether he should join the basketball team. Suddenly, he noticed Aoyi near some bushes and went over to her side when she called out to him. After a while, Makoto told Aoyi about his dilemma with regards to joining the basketball club or not. Aoyi in return asked him if there is really a need for him to choose. That's to say, if Makoto was conflicted on committing to something, then instead of joining the club, he should just join them whenever he felt like playing basketball. Makoto tells his classmate, who was in the basketball club, about his decision the next day. The classmate surprisingly accepted his decision without a fuss, although he did make him promise to be some sort of reserve player for the team, which Makoto happily accepted. As for Ryuji, he was in his classroom still conflicted on what to put on his career planning questionnaire. He made his decision, however, after he overhears some classmates talking about confessing to their crush who is supposed to graduate soon. That evening, Ryuji, Makoto, and Aoyi were watching the same movie in their respective houses, but had different levels of empathy towards the characters, seeing as they're facing different dilemmas. While Ryuji was conflicted on whether he should be confessing to Makoto or not, his best friend has almost made his mind, not to choose between wanting to become just a boy or just a girl. As for Aoyi, she watched the movie without having any particular emotions. Not long after, it was about time for the school festival and the students spent weeks preparing for it. Makoto's class was doing a takoyaki stand, while Aoyi's is a haunted house. As for Ryuji, he seemed to have kept it a secret, and even insisted that they don't visit when Aoyi went to ask him about it. The day of the festival came. Aoyi went to hang out with Makoto, and the two of them decided to visit Ryuji's class together. Turns out, Ryuji's class was doing a maid cafe, and the twist. Makoto was just about to leave when a problem suddenly occurred. It seems like one of Ryuji's classmates that was supposed to be one of the maids couldn't make it, so now they're short on staff. When Ryuji heard about it, he volunteered Makoto as a replacement. Later in the evening, the campfire was about to start, although Makoto had decided not to participate since he wanted to wear the maid outfit a little longer, so of course Ryuji also decided not to. Shortly after Makoto was about to hand Ryuji his uniform so he could change, when Ryuji's student handbook suddenly fell and Makoto's picture in it was laid in the open. We now go back to memory lane during Ryuji and Makoto's childhood. Even back then, Ryuji had already unconsciously fallen for Makoto, but fearing that he'll get teased or punished for doing something that isn't what is considered normal by most, Ryuji decided to hide it. At some point, the two of them eventually started getting estranged. Years later, the two of them reunited in high school. Ryuji was so surprised when he saw Makoto in a girl's uniform. At that time, Ryuji felt himself wanting to be close again with Makoto, but continued to distance himself as he continued to fear having his feelings being exposed. All these changed when the students started ostracizing Makoto for being a crossdresser and even made fun of him. This led to Ryuji getting into a fight with a classmate and eventually renewing his friendship with Makoto for good. Back to the present, Ryuji tried to make an excuse as he covered the picture in his student handbook, although it seems like it wasn't necessary since Makoto didn't see what was in it, at least according to how Makoto acted that night. However, that wasn't actually the case, and for some reason Makoto blames himself for it. Ever since then, however, Makoto had become more conscious about Ryuji and what he might actually feel for him. It wasn't long before Ryuji realized that Makoto did see the picture and had become aware of his feelings, and so Ryuji then decided to just admit it. But when Makoto started apologizing to him, Ryuji got upset and apologized in turn. Ryuji eventually left Makoto feeling uncertain if they can still remain as friends or not. The next day, Makoto found out that Ryuji had skipped school. Feeling responsible and not wanting to lose Ryuji, Makoto searched for Ryuji and asked him to start going out with him. Ryuji eventually agreed, even though just minutes before he had already decided to distance himself from Makoto. What can we say? Teenagers are inherently fragile species. Meanwhile, back at school, Aoyi was eating lunch with her friends when a teacher suddenly called out to her with news about her grandma. Just as Aoyi was leaving school, Makoto had just gotten back. He felt embarrassed, but at the same time happy that he and Ryuji can now go back to being how they were before. Aoyi was in a hurry, as she tried to call her father over the phone, although it went straight to voicemail. It seemed like it was a normal occurrence to Awo-yi, so she just resigned herself to leaving a voicemail instead. Fortunately, Awo-yi found out later that although Grandma did collapse, it wasn't anything serious. One good thing that resulted in this incident, however, is that Awo-yi's dad will actually go home. The next day, Awo-yi is back to her normal self and having lunch with her friends. Suddenly, an announcement was made by their teacher about a suspicious person roaming around the area, in which case they are advised to head straight home after school. Evening came and Awo-yi, taking a bath, was excited that her father would be arriving the following day. Suddenly, she saw a shadow pass by the window outside and remembered the teacher's warning about the suspicious person. Feeling scared and uncertain, Awo-yi wanted to call someone. She eventually decided to call Ryuji, who once told her that if ever something's bothering her, she can just tell him. Ryuji was in the middle of studying at that time and was surprised with her call. But when she said she's in trouble and needs help, he didn't hesitate to come running to her house even when he didn't even know the details. At this point, it doesn't really matter who. Ryuji has to end up with someone. He's the ideal boyfriend, isn't he? To Ryuji's surprise, however, everything seems to be fine, and Awo-yi was acting as she normally would. Although he soon realized that it was just a front and decided to stay with her for the night. Not long after, they heard someone trying to open the front door and decided to hide in the closet. They said someone eventually got inside the house and found them. Turned out it was actually Awo-yi's father, who had managed to get an earlier flight back home. After things got cleared up, Ryuji went home for the night, and the father-daughter duo spent time together waiting for the sunset and eating breakfast together like they used to. Although it seems like her dad has to go back to work by the end of the year, Awo-yi is just happy that they will actually be spending Christmas. By lunchtime at school later that day, Makoto was telling Ryuji that the suspicious person from yesterday was caught near Awo-yi's house and wondered if she and her grandma were all right. Ryuji then fills him in on what happened to Awo-yi's grandma and about her father's arrival. Hearing this, Makoto started feeling uncomfortable, seeing as even now Ryuji and Awo-yi are communicating just fine. Oh, could this be jealousy? But with who exactly? Anyways, by the end of lunch period, Ryuji shyly asks Makoto if he would like to spend Christmas Eve together with him, to which Makoto also shyly said yes to. On Makoto's way home from school, he saw an ad about an event for couples during Christmas Eve. He blushed as he wondered if Ryuji also wanted to kiss him. When Makoto asked him about it the next day, Ryuji got flustered, but eventually admitted that he did want to kiss Makoto. Ryuji, however, knows that Makoto's feelings for him aren't as strong as his. And so Ryuji told Makoto that just being together is already enough for him, at least for now. As the Christmas holidays draw near, Ryuji and Makoto's plans for Christmas are being laid down. Ryuji, however, still has some doubts about Makoto's feelings for him and was having second thoughts about their current relationship. Meanwhile, Makoto was trying to look for a gift for Ryuji, although he just ended up browsing cute stuff online. That is until he came upon a coin purse with whale designs and ended up thinking about Awo-yi. Speaking of Awo-yi, she was preparing to go to school when her father suddenly dropped the bomb on her. Turns out he has to go back to work immediately, which means he won't be able to spend Christmas with her. With a smile on her face, Awo-yi assured her father that it was fine and that she just so happens to have been invited by her friend to spend Christmas together. Once again, it was all just a front, and deep inside, Awo-yi is actually hurting. Christmas holidays should be spent with families and loved ones. You think so too, right? Let us know what your thoughts are, and please like and subscribe if you still haven't. Let's find out what will happen to the trio's Christmas holidays in our next video. Until then, bye-bye. With her father already off to his whale research and Grandma still in the hospital, Awo-yi decided to go to the planetarium on Christmas Eve by herself. During the show, however, she did think that she should have invited someone to go with her. After the show, she was on her way home when she suddenly saw a taxi with a woman who resembled her mom and ran after it. If she was going to be honest with herself, she knows that the woman in the taxi might not even be her mom, but she's still desperate to go after it. In the end, it still resulted in a failure even after she got on a borrowed bicycle. Awo-yi was in such a distraught condition when Makoto met her on his way to Ryuji's house. Makoto was very concerned for Awo-yi, seeing as she also hurt her knee. But Awo-yi did not want to burden Makoto with her insecurities about not having her mom with her, especially after she noticed the box of cake that Makoto had, which suggests that he was supposed to have a plan with someone tonight. However, Makoto's insistence won her over. In fact, Makoto even went as far as hugging Awo-yi and letting go of the cake. The sad part is that Ryuji saw that exact scene. See, Ryuji and Makoto were supposed to spend Christmas Eve together, as was their plan. But Makoto was running late, so Ryuji decided to meet him halfway. Who would have thought that he'd see his boyfriend hugging someone else instead? After Aoyi calmed down, Makoto offered to walk her to the station, even when he saw the box of cake, and remembered that he was supposed to be meeting Ryuji right about now. He even lied to Aoyi about having an appointment, which is such a disappointing move on Makoto's part. As for Ryuji, he has come to realize that perhaps Makoto really had no feelings for him all along. Meanwhile, it was revealed that the woman in the taxi was in fact Aoyi's mother. She had wanted to visit her daughter, but changed her mind and went back without meeting Aoyi in the end. She was afraid that perhaps Aoyi would not accept her anymore, seeing as it's been so long. Fast forward to the next day. Ryuji and Makoto hung out on Christmas Day. In fairness to Ryuji, he acted as if nothing had happened and went about doing couple stuff with Makoto, such as exchanging Christmas gifts and going on a date. Makoto then even wore a wig just so it wouldn't be so awkward as they went about their date. Later in the evening, the two went to get Aoyi after Makoto mentioned that he had met her the previous night and that she was feeling down. The three of them then went up to some high place where they were able to see a meteor shower. The next day, Makoto and Ryuji were supposed to hang out again. Seeing as Ryuji was still asleep, Makoto decided to wake him up instead. To his surprise, the sleeping Ryuji suddenly grabbed him for a hug. As Makoto struggled to get away from Ryuji, the image of Aoyi suddenly flashed into his mind. Not long after Ryuji woke up and apologized for what happened, blaming it all for him still being asleep. Although Makoto excused himself and left his boyfriend's room, it seems as if Ryuji had finally decided on something. Later that day, Ryuji and Makoto went to see a movie. For the most part of the show, they held hands as Ryuji requested. Makoto went along with it, even when Ryuji asked that they stay a bit longer after it was over. And when it was about time for them to go, Ryuji dropped the bomb on Makoto saying that they should break up. When Makoto asked why Ryuji suddenly invaded his personal space, Ryuji pointed out that Makoto was, in fact, feeling grossed out when they were at such a close distance, just like earlier that day when Ryuji tried to hug him. But Ryuji still wanted to have a clean breakup, and even thanked Makoto for everything with a smile. This is just so sad. I know it's not good to force your feelings on someone, but Ryuji doesn't deserve this at all. What do you guys think? Are you on Team Aoyi or Team Ryuji? Share with us your thoughts in the comments below. And once again, don't forget to like and subscribe. Picking up from where we left off previously. After that upsetting breakup, even though he was the one who broke things off, Ryuji is feeling very much upset that he went over to Aoyi's house to vent to her. As for Makoto, he couldn't help but blame himself for what had happened. The scene then transitions to a dream where Aoyi and Ryuji seem to be leaving Makoto because he couldn't make normal choices in life, as if normal is always the best choice. But hey, you do you. Anyways, it was thanks to this dream, and perhaps due to the recent events as well, that Makoto seemed to have realized what he really felt for Aoyi. Later at school, Aoyi sees Makoto staring at Ryuji from afar. When she asked why he's not greeting him, Makoto made it obvious that he and Ryuji are not on speaking terms at the moment. Bothered and confused at this turn of events, Aoyi went straight to Ryuji for the debts, who she found eating alone at the rooftop. In Ryuji's defense, he just doesn't want to burden Makoto by having to push himself to date him, even though he's obviously not in love. And the reason why both he and Makoto aren't doing anything was because each of them think that trying to fix things will just make the other hate them more. And this is why communication is the key to every relationship, even among friends. With the help of her grandma, though, Aoyi figured out that it's up to her to fix things between her senpais. Once weekend came, Aoyi sneakily invited Ryuji and Makoto only to have them spend the day together in the amusement park. The boys tried to leave at first, but after a very informative lesson from the whale expert, Aoyi-sensei, they had no choice but to do as she asked, especially since Makoto himself expressed how he would really want to fix things between them. And so the two spent the whole day having fun at the park, although it was Makoto who seemed to have enjoyed himself more. After reminiscing their past as childhood friends, they finally decided to make up. Although they couldn't go back to being a couple, at least they can still try being friends again. On another day, Aoyi unexpectedly ran into her mom at the shrine. Although she was really excited about it, her grandma doesn't seem to share the same sentiments and even forbid Aoyi from seeing her mom again. But kids grow up and make choices on their own. And just like how Makoto finally had the courage to say no to his mom, Aoyi, too, decided that she would still want to meet with her mom, despite grandma getting upset. Fortunately, Aoyi seemed to have better luck at making her decisions respected, without having anyone throwing a tantrum. That's to say, after talking it over, grandma eventually gave her blessings for Aoyi to spend more time with her mom even after Aoyi went behind her back. It was lunchtime, and owing to Ryuji's request, Aoyi was now eating lunch with him and Makoto once again. As they were enjoying their lunch, she updated her seniors regarding the situation between her mom and grandma. Somehow inspired by how it had turned out for Aoyi, Makoto also declares that he will once again try and talk to his mom about who he really is after the field trip that their grade will go to in the coming days. Later that day, a classmate named Saotome pleads with Makoto to be the bridge between him and a girl he has his eyes on named Hayase. It turns out Hayase was good friends with Makoto back in their freshman year. Makoto doesn't mind helping out, although he admits that he's unsure if Hayase would still want to talk to him. But to everyone's surprise, Hayase herself asked Makoto himself to hang out during the trip. Meanwhile, Aoyi and her mom are once again having an eat-out, after Aoyi mentions that her seniors will soon be going on a trip. Her mom suggested they go on a trip together as well, to which Aoyi excitedly agrees. On the first few days of the field trip, even just talking to each other was impossible though, as it looked like the world itself was against it. One evening, Ryuji and Saotome were passing by Hayase in the hallway of their accommodation, and realized that Hayase had always wanted to try and renew her friendship with Makoto, but was just afraid that it was already too late. Taking this chance, Saotome then promises that he will try his best to help her out during their field trip. And so, with everyone's help, Makoto and Hayase finally managed to be on speaking terms again, and even bonded over renting kimono costumes. The two also got the chance to address the reason why they grew apart. As it turns out, when Makoto's secret was found out by the whole school, everyone around them discouraged Hayase to keep hanging out with Makoto. Since then, Hayase had regretted not being strong enough to be there with Makoto and stay as his friend. But it was all in the past now, and finally the two can be friends again. Later that evening, Saotome was lamenting how it seems like he doesn't have a chance with Hayase, seeing as their personalities are the complete opposites and she might not like him at all. Ryuji, however, encourages Saotome to not give up easily, clearly speaking from personal experience with Makoto, who he's still very much smitten with. As for Makoto, he was pondering whether Saotome and Hayase will eventually date. Soon, his train of thought led him to Aoyi, whom he eventually accidentally called. They had a short conversation then, as they updated each other about their trips and promised to give each other souvenirs when they got back. Fast forward to the last day of the field trip. As everyone was about to get back home, Saotome once again tried his luck and confessed to Hayase in front of everyone. To his glee, Hayase didn't reject him, which gained them a loud applause from everyone else. Later that day, despite his nerves acting up, Makoto made up his mind to have the talk with his mom once and for all. But as expected, she started having a panic attack soon after. Evening came, and Makoto's father went to see him. Makoto wanted to apologize to his mom about what happened, as he once again blamed himself. His father then gives him an address where his maternal grandfather is, and advises him to go see him. Phew. It was just a roller coaster of emotions all throughout the video. We're right about the end, though. I bet some ideas are already playing in your mind on why his dad told him to go see his grandpa. Please share your theories in the comment section below. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss out on our next update, and please click on the like button if you enjoyed this video. The weekend came, and Grandma made Aoyi's mom uncomfortable as she just stared at her while they were waiting for Aoyi to come out. But it's not like the older lady is angry at her. Perhaps she's just being naughty and enjoys teasing. Anyways, the mother-daughter duo headed for the train station, where they met Makoto, who was also waiting for the Shinkansen. After a short introduction, the three decided to travel together. However, Aoyi and her mom had to get off first. As for Makoto, after a few more rides and walks, he eventually managed to get to his grandpa's place, where he was met by a long-haired older man. Back in the city, Makoto's mom was still unconscious and was dreaming about her younger years. It seems like, just like Makoto, she also enjoys cute and girly things. What she didn't know, though, was the fact that her father was also the same. Once she figured it out, she confronted her father, who admitted to it. Not that it made things better. In fact, after that confrontation, she threw away all her girly and cute stuff, and after her mom died, she completely cut off her dad. Going back to Makoto at his grandpa's place, Makoto was amazed at how everything in it seemed to have a touch of cuteness. Even the food he makes screams, kawaii. Although the older man looked passive, he seemed excited that his grandson had come to visit. Later on, Makoto found out that his grandfather's work involved making cute dresses for girls. As he watched the older man do his thing, Makoto couldn't help feeling comfortable and happy. Makoto also met his grandpa's neighbor, who occasionally brings stuff for the older man. She's a makeup artist who later made Makoto realize that what looks good or not is all up to him to decide. During Makoto's third night staying at his grandpa's place, the two went for a walk out in the snow and had a bit of a moment. Makoto found out that his grandpa had lost communication with her mom, and even though he regretted it, he's happy now. The older man tells Makoto that in life, there are times when you have to let go of important things, but at least you'll be able to keep at least one. Once they were back home later on, Makoto thought about all the things he had gone through in the past, all the ridicule and contempt, and also the support he had received from the people around him. Finally, he had decided on the best thing to do going forward. When Makoto returned from his trip, he went straight to the school to change and meet his parents while wearing his typical school getup. Yes, complete with the wig. He then asked his mom to spend time with him so that she could get to know the real him. Makoto explained to his parents that although his father gave him a choice to either live as a girl or as a boy, he decided that he would choose neither and just live the way that he wanted, which is a boy who likes girly things. And although he's not the son that his mom would like, he would still want her to accept him as who he is. Later on, despite her reluctance, Makoto's mom eventually agreed to go with him. The two then spent time looking around the mall for cute and girly stuff. Although there was a time when she found herself enjoying it, she still couldn't give him her blessings. Once evening came, Makoto's dad showed his mom the videos that Ryuji gave him. It was from the school trip their grade recently had in Kyoto. In it, they saw how despite wearing a yukata and walking around in a wig, Makoto was having a great time with his friends. The next morning, as Makoto heads off to school, his mom stops him and tells him they should go shopping again, like they did the day before. After realizing what that meant, Makoto couldn't help but shed tears of joy. Back at school, everything goes back to normal. This time it just feels lighter and better, now that Makoto doesn't have to hide and feel guilty about being himself. And that's it, guys. One thing about anime is that it doesn't only entertain, but also gives us life lessons. Did this anime have that effect on you? Share to us your thoughts below. Thank you so much for staying with us until the end. We hope you enjoyed this recap as much as we did. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss out on our next update, and please click on the like button if you enjoyed this video. See you in the next recap.